Hey everybody, I'm Tim, and today in the Secret Language of Cigars, we're talking about the parts of the plant. These produce power and presence and everything else. You're watching Cigars Daily. Hey, get a lot more out of this video when you join the community on Cigars Daily Plus and when you check it out on Rumble. The world of cigars is filled with terms that we use all the time and narrowly understand. These are words like Volado and Criollo and Corojo, and today we're going to look at a specific set of these words. We have covered so far in the series the different growing areas all around the world where leaf for premium handmade cigars come from. Not just parts of Latin America, but really across the globe. We've discovered where everything grows the best, and you can get more of this series when you check it out on this channel right here on this platform. But I want to tell you that today's video is about a really kind of critical part of the blending process. If you are a Latin American farmer of tobacco, you'll know these terms really well. These are the plant primings of a tobacco plant. Now I'm going to be showing you guys this plant right here. And I just want to tell you up front, this is not really a fair representation of a plant because the one I'm showing you on the screen is only a few feet tall. In reality, these plants in the field can grow to be like 12 to 16 feet tall. Obviously, for cigar makers who want to roll as many cigars as they can, the bigger these plants get, the better. But also, each one of these plants has different layers, levels, or primings that tell you what kind of leaf are coming off that part of the plant. Each of these different layers or primings offers something different for a cigar blender to use to create an interesting and complex flavor profile. And so with no further ado, let's go through each one of them so you can recognize them and know exactly what they are. And not to be anticlimactic here, because if there's one thing I don't want to do, it's take away the climax of this thing. But the first two primings we're going to talk about, you're not going to read a ton about them inside of the blending information of a cigar. So let me tell you about them in tandem and what they're used for. The lowest priming here is called Volado leaves. These leaves are huge. They're the biggest leaves on the plant. In fact, as we go up the plant, the leaves get smaller and smaller toward the top. Just above the Volado leaves are also called Seco leaves. Now, in order to explain to you what these leaves add to a profile and where you which cigars you might expect to find them in, let me explain this to you with a metaphor. Let's say that you go to a fancy restaurant. You have a beautiful dinner with someone that you love and cherish. And then at the end of the dinner, the waiter says, "Would you like dessert?" And he says, "Tonight we have a house special. We are serving a beautiful white cake that comes with a special French caramel sauce and has been cooked with a vanilla from the region of Paris that blah, blah, blah," whatever they say to try to entice you to spend the damn money on the overpriced dessert. This is something that you'll find. These cakes are often mentioned for the trimmings that come along with them. The parts of the recipe that don't get mentioned to you is stuff like the flour and the eggs. And when you talk on a tobacco plant like this about these lower primings like Volado and Seco, these two things are often used more like the flour or the eggs in a cigar blend. When they put together the filler and the binder and the wrapper, and especially in the filler, the Volado and Seco leaves can be used a little bit like that. They're good for aroma. They're good for combustion. They help give the cigar a nice even burn when you fill them out with them, but they also help fill out the cigar all the way around. There are other parts of the plant as we move up this thing that are going to give a little bit more character and flavor. But cigars where you're going to find Volado and Seco leaves in the blend, even if they're not listed or mentioned, are often cigars where you find the filler just listed as filler from a particular country. An example would be this, and I can't swear that these cigars have Volado and Seco leaf in them, although if I was a betting man, I would bet that they do. But these are cigars that just generically list the country of origin for their fillers, like Arturo Fuente's Hemingway. Arturo Fuente is famously Dominican and Dominicanly famous, by the way. They're one of the most world famous brands in the world. And if you read through their blending information of their cigars, they mention the varietal of the wrapper, but for the binder and filler, mostly they just say Dominican, but often it's various primings of the Dominican leaf, and these can include Seco and Volado. Similarly, the world famous Padron cigars. Padron lists their leaf as Nicaraguan, basically throughout, wrapper, binder, filler, and oftentimes they'll list something special in the wrapper if there's something other than just the Nicaraguan wrapper. But when you work your way down to those filler leaves, they're working with Nicaraguan filler from a plant like this, and often those Seco and Volado leaves will be included in that. And so these are commonly used in a plant, but you can think about them more or less like the flour or eggs in a cake. They help fill the thing out and give the cigar what it really needs to get to the part that gets you all excited. And now we're going to climb our way up to some of the more interesting and integral primings of the plant. This is where blenders get to play and have fun. If we're going back to my dessert metaphor, this is where you get your fancy caramel and vanilla from the shores of the river in France or whatever the hell they're going to tell you about. But the next one above Seco is called Viso. Viso leaves are, again, a little smaller than the Seco leaves, a little bit higher up on the plant, but what these leaves get is a little more sun exposure. And by the way, this is a huge spoiler for you. Sun exposure is going to increase the strength and eventually sort of the flavor character that each of these primings will add. As we look at the Viso, it gets sun that the Seco and Volado don't get as much of. And that's because those leaves are primarily covered by the higher primings. But those Viso leaves, they get a little bit more strength, more of a medium type strength. This is where you start to bring out flavor characteristics like maybe a little bit of sweetness. These are also leaves that can be used for combustion and to sort of balance out creating a good burn on a cigar. And again, these Viso leaves are even covered by higher primings above them. And so you're not going to see Viso mentioned a ton in the blend. You'll find that often cigars that just mention the country, like I mentioned, Fuente and Padron, will have Viso leaves in the blend, but there are some blends here that are starting to specifically mention that they're using Viso in them. A great example of this is the Bolivar Cofradia Oscuro. This is a cigar where they were aiming for some strength in the flavor profile, and they specifically mentioned that in the blend, in the filler, is a Nicaraguan Habano Viso leaf. Now, this is important enough to them, and the leaf is enough of a contributor to the flavor of Bolivar that they mention it in this blending information specifically so that you know what you're looking for. And as we continue to climb the stalk of this giant plant, we're going to get into the really interesting stuff now where, believe it or not, there are primings that are controversial. Because let's face it, there's nothing in this world that's not controversial anymore. But before we get to all the controversy, we're going to talk about the king of primings, the leaf that gets all the attention. If you're going to find a priming on a plant that's specifically mentioned in the blending information of a cigar, it is the Ligero leaf, also pronounced Ligero and Ligero. I mean, we say it all kinds of different ways, but truth be told, these are the leaves that, as the cigar industry, we're the most proud of. If somebody's using Ligero leaf, especially from Nicaragua, you'll see this mentioned increasingly in blending information for new cigars. And a big part of the reason for this is that in a country like Nicaragua, where strength is the feature and character of the leaf that grows there, the Ligero leaf gets the most prime strength. These leaves grow near the top of the plant, and so they get the most sun exposure. You can easily tell the difference between a Seco or Volado or a Viso or a Ligero because these Ligero leaves become thick, rubbery leaves, extremely oily from lots of time out in the sun. I spent some time in a sorting room going through these different types of leaf, and even to me, a gringo, it was pretty evident which ones were the Ligeros. When they blend a cigar, they use Ligero leaves to bring out all kinds of different flavors, especially ones that contribute to cigars that are stronger. Stuff like pepper and spice, dark notes like coffee and espresso, and dark chocolate notes even come out of some of these Ligeros. Now, unlike the primings underneath, which are often used for combustion and burn a little bit quicker, this thicker, more rubbery, oily leaf burns a little bit slower. So if you're looking at a premium cigar down the middle, that Ligero leaf is going to be right at the center of the blend. When they roll a cigar, that leaf goes in the very middle. For that reason, when some people are smoking a cigar, they'll notice a little tip forms at the center of the ash. This is referred to sometimes as the punta de lanza. The point of the lance, or the point of the spear. It's literally those Ligero fillers burning a little bit slower than everything else around them, but it still creates a nice, even, consistent flavor throughout the smoke. So that's why Ligero leaves are so important, and the placement of them is just as important. Now, as far as projects that use Ligero leaf, my goodness, there are more of them out there than I can count. But I will gladly tell you that you can find a really nice, powerful, bold, peppery, dark Ligero leaf at the center of Espinosa's Murcielago Daily Edition Echo Hail, a project I got to work on with Eric Espinosa to create something unique in Espinosa's profile with a dark Sumatra wrapper and really nice, bold, vibrant flavor notes throughout the cigar, and a lot of them contributed to by the Ligero leaf that runs through the middle. So the Ligero leaf gets all the sun, it gets all the attention, and it has all the fun, but there are even primings above that, and this is honestly where we get into some controversy. At the top of the plant, there is a standard priming that's found on most plants, almost all plants I should say, and then there's one that's really not. You see, the common upper priming is called the Corona leaves. But also on about 10 to 15% of these plants, you find a little leaf called medio tiempo leaves. These are tiny leaves that, once again, being near the top of the plant, spending all day sunbathing and getting a tan, are super bold. Medio tiempo leaves are ones that the brands that use them are almost definitely going to mention them in the blend. And these are the ones where we are getting into the realm of conspiracy, baby. There are people out there who, believe it or not, do not believe that medio tiempo leaves exist. I've heard people talk about this. They talk about it in Facebook groups online, like, man, a medio tiempo isn't real. Now, I haven't met the people who are making these claims. I don't know what they do for a living. I can't imagine that it's farm tobacco in Latin America. Maybe they do, probably not. But I'll tell you, cigar makers consistently will tell you that there's about 10 to 15% of plants that grow these leaves, and blends like the Partagas Black, a timeless classic cigar, does claim to have that medio tiempo in its fillers. But also at the top of the leaf, there's a very famous, very widely known priming called Corona leaves that I mentioned. Now, this is a powerful, bold set of leaves. Just above the Ligero leaves, it does get a ton of sun exposure. This is where you're counting on a little bit slower of a burn, just like the Ligero. A little bit more flavor character, just like the Ligero, but even more power, ratcheted up just a little bit. You can really drive character, but it doesn't necessarily have to create a super powerful cigar. A great example of this is the Arturo Fuente Rosado Sun-Grown Magnum R. This is a blend from Arturo Fuente that they're incredibly proud of, but does use some of these Corona priming leaves. It's not an overwhelmingly strong cigar because Corona leaves are actually pretty small. In order to add some character to the flavor of a cigar, you don't have to use a whole one of these leaves. Sometimes they can just use part of one. This is sort of like when you are building your cake and you've put in your flour and you put in your eggs and whatever the hell else they put into a cake, and then you add just a dash of this and a dash of that, your special caramel and vanilla, to really bring out a vibrant flavor. Your Corona leaves, they go in just a little bit at a time and they bring out a whole lot of wow. And that gives us a very well filled out list of the different primings, especially ones that are used and even mentioned specifically in blending information today. There's just one more little thing that I'll mention to you that to me is just a wildly interesting tidbit. Right here at the top of the plant, up near right near the top there, you see these flowers. This is also where the seed pods grow for a tobacco plant. And amazingly, a seed pod will dump out seeds so small that there are 10,000 seeds to a gram. I'm going to say that again. 10,000 seeds to a gram. They're so tiny that in order to start growing the crops of these, they mix these seeds in a big coffee can, like a big metal coffee can with a bunch of ash. They poke holes in the lid and they literally shake them out over trays of soil to start growing new crops. They're absolutely minuscule seeds that grow into these huge, massive plants. They do it all in a matter of months. They grow every one of these primings. It's an amazing process that at the end of the day creates an interesting flavor profile in every cigar that you've ever seen or heard of. This is one of the things I love about it, and there is your intro to plant primings in the secret language of cigars. Thank you so much for joining me here. What is, by the way, the curious cigar language that you've heard that you maybe don't even fully understand? Drop a comment down below. What is the one thing you've heard in a blend that you're like, what in the hell is that? Ask me, and I want to get to all of them in this series. And I want to thank you again for joining me. Get more out of this video when you join the community on Cigars Daily Plus and when you watch it on Rumble. Thanks again so much for watching. This is Tim signing off for Cigars Daily, and I will see you in the comments.